What happens when you infuse AI throughout your technology stack? If done properly, you can achieve tremendous optimization. Silicon Valley juggernaut Databricks did just that, and the results have been remarkable. Much faster query performance and significant savings on data storage. How does it work? Find out more on this episode of Future Proof.
The future is here already. It's just not evenly distributed. Yet. Today's world teems with innovation. The nexus of hardware, software, and human ingenuity promises a revolution in possibilities. What does tomorrow look like? Witness Future Proof.
Yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh. I am so excited, folks, to have with me two experts in, the central topic of the analytics industry, analytic engines, the engines that actually crank out the number crunching that you use to understand your data. And boy, how things have changed. I mean, when this show began in 2008, and yes, we turn 17 next month, there were some great vendors. Teradata was still ruling the roost. We weren't quite into the Cloudera era, but that was about to start. And then, of course, we had Hortonworks and MapR and all these other companies that came along. And then, as the elephant was sort of fading, as people figured out that this Hadoop stuff and HDFS was pretty cumbersome and didn't really do everything they wanted, as they figured out that MapReduce would not solve all the world's problems, another company started coming up. A couple of them. One was called Databricks. One was called Snowflake. And we have Franco Patano from Databricks on the line today. I've been researching their latest innovations, and it's just mind-blowing, the things that they're working on over there. And we also have Rogers, Jeffrey, Leo, John from a company called DataChat, and one of their co-founders. And the other co-founder was on the show last year, who spent some time in Pittsburgh. So yours truly is in the Pittsburgh area these days. And I always joke that when I tell people I'm from Pittsburgh on Zoom calls, later in the call they say, "So how's Philadelphia?" And I say, "I don't know. It's a long way away." But it's okay. Philly gets all the attention, is what I'm saying. Pittsburgh is a cool place to be. But with that, let's bring in Franco Patano. Franco, I've been looking up at the advances you're making at Databricks, and it's really impressive. And one of the things I like is AI throughout the stack, and using AI to optimize things like performance and things like data storage, like how you're working with your data. So just walk us through some of the big innovations you've come up with lately, and tell us how that's helping your clients.
Yeah. Hey, Eric, thanks for having me on, and thanks to your audience for tuning in. Really appreciate you all. Um, we're so happy to be here. So, I've been at Databricks going on 6 years here, and kind of how when I first got here, I was like a data warehousing and BI person when I came, and Databricks was still the big data ML company back then, and they knew they wanted to go in the data warehousing space. And I remember I used to write blogs, give webinars, give talks about how to get great performance by tuning all the knobs in
Right.
in Apache Spark and Delta to get great performance, right? And over the years, we've hired brilliant product people from all over. Some of my favorite competitors. A lot of them we hire out of school, and then we hire all their best friends who are really smart. Well, as my co-founder likes to say. But basically, over the years, I've had a few of these PMs come to me and be like, "Hey, listen, can't we reduce the number of knobs? Can't we make this simpler?" Especially now that we have like AI here that can kind of handle some of this. And absolutely, I mean, it's not rocket science yet. It's just figuring out how to like tune all these things given your workloads. And so this year, in 24, we launched something called predictive optimization.
Hmm.
And predictive optimization basically takes a look at all the queries that the users are firing off, and it understands the queries and like where the data is and what tables, what columns they're selecting. And it actually pushes optimizations into the file format, so the data at rest on the data lakes. And it kind of manages all the complexity for you, given how the users are querying the system.
Hmm.
And it constantly does this. Actually, a couple novel things that it does, it actually has a model to determine if it should do an operation.
Hmm.
It won't do the operation unless it has ROI, meaning that it's going to make queries faster and cheaper, and it has a floor. So if it's not going to give you performance benefit, it's not going to waste your money to do it because you pay the customer pays for compute time for these services to run, right?
Hmm.
So some novel innovations there. And what's interesting is we had some early customers just turn it on. One of the famous ones that we use on all our slides was that the battery and cable company Anker. You probably have some devices from them. They're great Databricks customers. You should buy more of their stuff. But essentially, they turned on predictive optimization, and you can see in the chart exactly when they turned it on because their storage costs dropped by half. They halved their
Wow.
storage costs and they got double the performance. So their query execution times went down by half. So they got double the performance, half of the storage costs. And they're like, what is this voodoo that you just turned on for us? And we're like, listen, we took like decades of experience in data warehousing and AI systems and everything you need to know. And we basically created a model to do all these things and to tune it. And that's kind of what it did. And now, actually, there's a lot more that it does now. Now, as of this latest release, um, in data warehousing and data systems, one of the other things besides having your data right, having the right file sizes on disk and having the right clustering and all those things, data at rest, right? One of their biggest things is for the query optimizer to have good stats. And there are tons of programs and query tuning. One of my favorites is Brent Ozar from the SQL Server world. Tons of content on how to tune queries. And if you boil it all down to it's, does the optimizer have the right stats, right? Does the query, is it generating the right query plan? And so you can do this manually in Databricks. And it's like one of my top three performance tuning items is did you collect stats for the Metastore? And now we actually have predictive optimization has automatic stats collection, and it's actually scalable. The old one was naive. It would collect stats on everything, like all at once, and it was very expensive as data volumes grew. This new one is actually scalable. It's much more efficient in how it does it. So now, not only does predictive optimization get your data right at rest, but it also gets the query right by choosing the right plan and joint strategy with that plan. So lots of innovation there, not just on data at rest, but data that is being queried. So query plan intelligence, so that we're optimizing the whole stack from rest to execution all the way up to BI. And
Yeah,
so those are some of the things that we released.
that's crazy. I mean, really, it's very, very impressive because I've thought, just to give you some context, when this show first started in 2008, I had been in the industry about 3 or 4 years formally. Well, no, actually longer than that, I guess. It was like 7 years. 2001 is when I worked for a consultancy in Austin that did ETL and data warehousing jobs and things of this nature. And it didn't take me too long to figure out, man, these ETL jobs, like all these batch windows ratcheted up, and then you've got 24/7, all these windows you have to hit. There's no agility. You just have to, follow the rules and get all this stuff in. And I thought to myself, I would ask vendors, how much visibility do you have into redundancy of data movement? And did you really have to move this data? Is that data getting used? All these questions. They're like, what are you talking about? Like, no, we just move the data and go on to the next part of our job. And now what you're talking about is being able to sense what is getting used, how it's getting used, what's getting queried, what the results of that query are, and all that you put into a model to optimize the architecture of where the data is stored, how the data is accessed, what the actual runtime looks like. I mean, that is amazing. So you're basically honing it down to, or chiseling it down, I guess, to the essential processes, the essential functions and data, and only working on that to generate business value. Is that about right?
Yeah. Uh, Instead of how I kind of explain is you can pay a data engineer, data warehousing architect, a lot of money to manually go through because they're humans, right? Can some of them create scripts? Absolutely. But they have to reason about, they have to reason about how are the users going to query the system. And most of the time they don't know. Most of the time they're relying on business people or business analysts
Right.
in,
Right.
in the game of enterprise telephone, as I like to call it, right? To tell them like what are they going to be querying, and God knows if it's right. Like they have no idea. They're only given the information they have, and Yeah, you can either pay these very expensive people to go out there and do this one time for you. Maybe they have some scripts that keep things fresh. Um, or, we took decades of experience in building these systems and we built models, AI models to do that on your behalf in real time and constantly monitoring the system on your behalf to do it for you. And most people are like, where do I sign up for the AI, right? Like,
Right.
why would I pay humans to do this? I think you should still have humans in the loop to validate that it's doing the right things. And that's what we have is the AI emits all of its metadata to a system table. And now architects don't have to worry about like the being pedantic about all the little things. They can just say, okay, I think the AI is doing the right things, or I don't like this thing. Let me go in and change. But it kind of lets them get to a higher layer of abstraction where they're not so inundated in like the little things. So as I like to say, we're not getting rid of your people. We're making them more efficient.
Yeah.
We're optimizing away the boring stuff or the minutia.
Well, and if you think about how much time and effort used to go into all of these mundane tasks and just how unpleasant those tasks can be to execute, and then you figure the creative push that you get by freeing the developers of all that sort of tedium, it's like a double whammy of value, right?
Yeah, and God forbid one of your jobs fails and your entire schedule of optimization is thrown off, and now someone's got to go in there to kind of like recover and pick up all the pieces. Yeah, it can be a night. It's a full-time job for most people. I used to. There's a lot of jokes in industry. Some warehouse architects used to have two jobs because they would just kind of work both at the same time. Just their scripts are running most of the time, right? You don't need to be active all the time, right? If you know what you're doing. But nowadays, I don't think that that's the case anymore. But essentially, like, why would you want to worry about the little things if you didn't have to?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. And let's bring in Rogers here to kind of comment on some of that stuff and let us know what he's working on. But Rogers, what Franco was talking about here, I think, is really the next phase of evolution for these technologies to leverage AI to build models that understand how engines work and give you visibility into what you can do to improve them, and then ideally automate that process. Right now, I know DataChat, you come up with this idea of letting Gen AI serve as the linguistic model of interacting with data. Right? Tell us about what you thought of everything that Franco just said and that what you guys are working on.
Right. Yeah. So first, hello everyone. Nice to be on this show. And so this was some really great points from Franco. So essentially, like AI is, the potential of AI is essentially amazing in the sense that, a lot of these manual one-off stuff that the humans have to be involved and probably takes days or even weeks for them to actually optimize even a single query. So before my data chat stint, I used to work in the data team in one of the large gaming companies, and then we used to go around to like, hey, tell me what your queries are, what queries are critical, what queries are slower. Let me create an index. Let me create this particular storage layout, and all of that. So all of this stuff is now being done in a matter of a few hours or seconds, just and that's great potential. Like time saved is a lot, and this is just really a start. And as like Franco mentioned, and the key to all of this is collecting more data and
Mm,
statistics around what
mhm.
your query patterns are, and tuning your and tuning in the sense like not manually tuning but automatically tuning your organization of the data, the compute around it, so that you get efficiency in all fronts. And that's really great. And just switching to what we do in data chat. So data chat is a Gen AI based no code data analytics platform for business users that lets them just gain insights from the data by talking to data in plain English.
Databricks is a juggernaut these days. I think they just passed Snowflake in terms of market cap based upon their recent revenue raise, a round J. That's pretty interesting, pretty impressive stuff. And I've known Ali Ghodsi for, gosh, I guess about 12 or 13 years now. I remember the early days. He's a very savvy businessman, and he's made some really compelling decisions. Grabbing Mosaic ML, for example, grabbing Tabular. That was like, what just happened? But let's get back into AI and BI because traditional BI, of course, has been around for a long time, very valuable, but fairly manual. AI is much more dynamic, and if you get it right, will optimize all sorts of things. So AI, at least in the Databricks world now, is making BI much simpler and much more scalable. You want to talk about that for a minute, Franco?
Yeah. Uh, so what is super interesting here is that one thing that I consistently hear from our customers is I need to be able to democratize data. I think a lot of the data vendors use this as their kind of in their marketing, but what does that really mean? Like, and if you think about, like, I actually think about it in terms of government. We actually live in a republic because representatives represent us in government. Democracy is actually like I have direct influence in what happens, and that's what
Right.
it means. Is like data democratizing data means that me as a user, I get access to the data and I'm interacting with it myself. Someone's not representing me, because usually a representative would be like a BI dashboard, would be like something that would represent data, but usually the user couldn't touch the data themselves, right? And this goes to one of my favorite follow-up questions. I usually, when I'm giving a presentation, I'll ask, after you made a brand new dashboard, what's the first follow-up question you'll get? And if you've designed it to spec and everything is there, generally it's, can I export this to Excel, right? And why is that? Well, you know what? Your dashboard's great, but I have my own bespoke questions to ask it. I have follow-up questions. I want to, we call it drill into or drill down. I want to drill into this. I want to understand why this metric is, it looks like that, right? And so we didn't have, I think Tableau tried to do NLP on top of data a decade ago, and it never really took off. But what we have now with Gen AI, with these large language models, especially when GPT came out, we have the ability to actually get better NLP out of our with these use cases. And so some things that we've done is, making these dashboards super simply without having to take 10, 20 hours or 40 hours of training in something like a Power BI and Tableau. In Databricks and our AI BI dashboards, you just prompt it for the visualization you want. So create me a
Wow.
bar chart of revenue over time, and it just creates it for you, right? You prompt it and it creates it. Uh, I think you might have mentioned something last segment about we can talk to these computers in natural language, right? Just like in Star Trek, like computer shields up, right? And then
Right.
does it, right? And they didn't have to interact with it. I always found it interesting. What was data and all the science officers doing on the computers like this in the background when you could talk to it? Like what the hell were
Right.
they doing, right? Like that's probably data engineers, right? Or
That's
data.
pretty funny.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, no,
but
I mean, this is really fascinating. And I think you're also speaking to, again, this wave of behavioral change, like how you interact with these systems. And I'm reminded that I think mindset is going to be one of the big hindrances now, just getting people to realize you don't have to do things this old-fashioned way. I mean, you used to spend days and weeks, building out dashboards. Now, if you have live access to the data, to your point, you can just type in a few words, give me a bar chart with customer in Northeast region and who bought more than $50,000 in the last month. And it's like, boom, there it is. I mean, that is just head and shoulders above the old way of doing things because you're saving tremendous amounts of time, even if what you discover is that what you're asking is not that important, right?
Exactly. One of my follow-up questions and usually when I talk to customers, we're talking about their strategies. And it's like, well, I have 1,000 dashboards we have to migrate. And I'm like,
No.
do you need 1,000 dashboards?
Right.
Or do you need like five with a self-service agent,
Right.
right? To answer the bespoke things that they'll have. And they're like, oh, I've never thought about it that way. And that leads to like the innovation that Databricks did over the past year with our AI BI dashboards to handle this what I call the scalable self-service problem, which is you can create a dashboard, but then it actually comes with a little chat window that you can chat with the data model in that dashboard and drill down to it right there. And
Wow.
it will write the queries for you, fire them off on the back end, and come back to you and show you the result. And you don't have to export to Excel anymore. So it's like, do you need to learn VLOOKUP? anymore now if you get this agent that just knows your data. But something that you all talked about last segment is the agent has to understand the data itself. And one thing that we have found at Databricks, we also had the innovation of Unity Catalog, but having the complete metadata. And one of the crucial innovations in Unity was the AI generated fields like table descriptions, catalog descriptions, all
Interesting.
that information. Turns out if you infuse metadata into your catalog and then you feed that metadata into these agents to be able to answer these questions, the context that they have, we know context is king or queen depending upon how you rule the world in these LLMs, right? So you give them all the context that we have AI generated too, that these business people validate, we get so much better answers. Like I have people saying, like, I can't believe it understood this one archaic term that we have in our company. Well, it's in the table description, right? So of course we pulled it, the LLM pulled it from there. So essentially, how do you scale self-service? I think once the knowledge, kind of the tribal knowledge, gets fed into Unity Catalog and it's centralized, and then we're also working on a metrics layer this year. Once we have the metrics and the knowledge, I think the self-service agents, we call it Genie, kind of the natural language question answering inside of the AI BI dashboards. I think it gets much smarter and it's able to give much accurate answers. So that's kind of what we're thinking about with scalable self-service with AI.
Yeah, and I'll throw one question at you, and then we'll bring Rogers back in. We did a show a couple years ago on sunsetting applications and other enterprise fairy tales, joking that it's so hard to kill an enterprise application. Once it's out there and being used, good luck taking it down. But now is the time to do that, it seems to me. Your comment about dashboards is really quite remarkable because you're right. In many large organizations, they have thousands of these dashboards. They're paying for all of them to be maintained. And of course, many of them are not being actively maintained. They're just sitting out there. Many of them aren't even being used. So if you can see into these environments and use machine learning to capture who's using what and where, to capture what the data is hot, which data is cold, all that stuff, and use that as in your model to optimize the architecture. You saved like 96% of your time and energy if you take that approach, right?
I'll up the ante a little bit. Uh, what happens when a user extracts to Excel, all the ungodly things that they did to that unfortunate data on that spreadsheet is
Right.
stuck
It's
inside
gone.
that spreadsheet
Right, it's
silo in a
gone.
box on their laptop, right?
That's right.
With Genie, we capture all the questions and we surface it up for the room builder, and we show every question answer pair that users asked, what question they asked, what they got. And that it actually helps them build better dashboards or design better data rooms or Genie rooms to answer these questions. So absolutely, like there's a mess of things going on in these enterprises. I think there's optimization ripe for the picking. There's tons of low-hanging fruit. I think we should question everything. You don't need 1,000 dashboards. You need maybe 10, and
Right.
some really good self-service capabilities, I think, is the future.
Yeah, I have to agree. And I'll throw it over to Rogers to kind of comment on that, on the old way of doing things, because there's this long legacy of how we got here and all these tools and approaches and methods and consultants who do things, and that's just the way things were done. And it was very time consuming. And so much of that can and should go right out the window. What do you think, Rogers?
Yeah, I totally agree. I guess dashboards have served their use. Make no mistakes, that dashboards will still serve their use, but they have a very specific purpose. If you're looking for a certain KPI and that's all you need, you don't need any other thing. You just need a dashboard. You just look at the chart, refresh it, and you're done for making a business decision. But now comes the question of what's next? I need to understand what's going on a little bit more based on what I observed in the dashboard. And that's where all of these self-service capabilities come in. And I've been thinking about like self-service, and the term self-service has been around for a long time, but have they been truly self-service? Because typically when people talk about self-service, they'll give you a tool, you need to learn the tool, and then when you have a question, now you still need to understand what buttons do I click and what
Right.
sequence do I click to actually get the answer. That is not
Right.
self-service.
Right.
You need a business question and you should be just able to ask it directly. And that's what Gen AI has empowered. people to do. Of course, there are some caveats with using Gen AI, right? You need to be able to provide the right context. It needs to understand the history of what you've asked. And Gen AI sometimes will not get your question right. So you need to be able to iterate on the data, provide hints. So you need to be able to understand how Gen AI has thought about your question so that you can refine your question and get better answers and better value out of Gen AI. So yeah, so I totally agree.
Well, and just the amount of time that is saved, and you think about the example of thousands of dashboards. I cannot tell you the number of companies I've talked to who have thousands of dashboards, and obviously they're not being used. But historically, it was difficult to track and manage and build models around that stuff. It was just too expensive. But we've seen really in the last few years, all those cost dynamics change dramatically. And once you can find a way to optimize this entire stack, to not go down that road, I think is downright perilous. What do you think, Rogers?
Yeah, yeah. So, and the cost of the dashboards are essentially, you create a dashboard, you invest significant amount of time, then you replicate those dashboards, and pretty much you end up with a whole array of dashboards that sometimes you don't even look at, and you essentially get into a dashboard nightmare and maintenance. And those dashboards are still driving compute, make no mistake, right? Because
Right,
they are
right.
there, they make queries, they're probably running in a schedule, and you kind of don't know what's going on. So it's not about just like them being idle, but also costing money for the organization. So kind of having this, I totally agree with what Franco said in terms of like, hey, there are a few certain business critical KPIs where you would need to using a dashboard, right? And then you then augment them with a self-service tool where you just start asking questions and you get answers, and you can build more centralized intelligence around it, like what data is being used, what is being consumed, how are people, what are your hotspots in your data, perhaps, right? So that you can optimize access around it as opposed to just trying to figure out what's going on in your org based on all this million dashboards.
Right, right. And we got about 2.5 minutes left. I'll throw it over to Franco. The other thing you could do with these models, these large language models in particular, if they are embedded and connected to your systems, is ask it, how can we improve things? Right? I mean, you can ask it very basic questions. And again, it may not give you the right answer, but it will give you answers. And those could lead to all kinds of different things, right? I mean, you could actually just ask it, how can we improve our architecture and see what it says, right? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just looking for it. So this is actually interesting. So I've seen the evolution of this at Databricks. When we launched system tables late last year, people all of a sudden got access to all this rich metadata about what's going on with the Databricks deployments, right? And a lot of our SAs created these really awesome tools, dashboards that would look at all the data and through a rat's nest of case statements used to give a recommendation. Well, and then Gen AI came along, and then now I have SAs who create Genie rooms with all the system tables, and you just ask it questions about, hey, how can I make any optimizations, or can I do anything to make my queries faster, or can I do anything to make my platform cheaper? And it's super interesting, the stuff that's been coming out of their woodwork. So absolutely. On Databricks, we launched the system tables last year, and now these Genie data rooms. And so now customers are able to do exactly that. And it's pretty fun watching what they create.
I mean, honest to goodness, that is just so fascinating because historically, I like your comment about rat's nest. Historically, it is so difficult to get deep into the weeds like that. And you have to be a very, very intelligent, very savvy person to sort of manage all that data in your head, connect the dots, and figure out what's going on. Well, these models don't have to be like that. I mean, they already have the capability from their inference layers and all kinds of things that are going on to be able to reveal that to you. And so I think it's like, we had a guy on last year made a really good point about AI and machine learning, and he goes, you know what the most important thing is now? Learning. And it's human learning about how these things work and what things they can do and which things they do especially well. And then just being able to have the humility to say, you know what, the machine is probably right when it gives me these answers. Not always right. You always want a human in the loop with these things. You don't want a fully autonomous AI agent, folks. I promise you. You want perhaps a largely autonomous AI agent doing things. You want to monitor it, be able to control it, curb it, shepherd it, all that kind of fun stuff. But nonetheless, like the answers you can get about deep technical architectural concepts is absolutely stunning.